what we've got here, a developer is using a structured approach to programming. For those of you that don't know what a structured approach is, it is the way that the code is kind of shown on the screen. Remember when we talk about indentation with your ifs, with your loops, with your general structure of your code, that's what it means. Don't overthink it. It's just how I've taught you to code so far, whereas if you have an if, you indent. If you have a while, you indent. If you have a for, you indent. Okay? It's all of that. So it's taken a structured approach and it wants to write a subroutine to solve one of the sub-problems. What that might mean, for those of you that don't understand how this works, for example, if you have a game, all right, you may have a subroutine that handles your scoring system. You might have a subsystem that handles levels, and then you have level 1, 2, and 3. So the idea of using a subroutine is to break up your program into smaller, more manageable chunks. So if you like, this program here is one sub part of the big problem, all right? This subroutine should have the following interface. So the great thing about programming exams is they are probably some of the easiest GCSEs to pass if you pay attention to the mark scheme that they actually give you in the question. All right? So let's have a look here. There is a subroutine called find minimum. That means that is the name of your subroutine. All right? Then, the subroutine takes an array of integers as a parameter. So these are the things that will be passed in. It will return. The difference between a there are two types of subroutine available. You have a function and a procedure. This is a function because it returns a value, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So let's start this off. What you need to do in pseudocode, I'm going to show you how to do this in Python as well, because you need to be able to code in both. More so in Python, you need to be able to handwrite Python code. So let's start in sudo first, and what you would have is subroutine in capital letters. What's my subroutine called? Find minimum. Okay, so use now this is a 7-mark program. Isn't it nice to know that the exam board have given you one easy mark right there? Right, so that's one of my marks I've got there, even without you seeing the mark scheme. Right, it says takes an array of integers as a parameter. How do I pass in a parameter into a function or a procedure? How do I pass something into my program? Yes.
You have brackets and then you have maybe x.
Yes. But what you've got to do is make sure it's relevant to the context of the question. This says an array of integers, okay? What I would do personally, if it says it's taking in a parameter, all I need to do is I have my bracket and I'm going to call it R because it says array. Give something in the name that represents what they've done. You don't need to write the full word array of integers. I'm just going to say R underscore int. And that's that. So I've now got my second mark. That's my parameter. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to label that, and I think you should too. Parameter. Okay? So I've got my array. I've got my parameters. Now, it says returns the smallest value in that parameter. Let's think about the logistical way we would approach this here. If I've got a list of numbers, what would I need to do? This is even before I think about coding. So I've got a list of numbers here. So let's just write these down here. How would I find the smallest number? What do you think? By ordering it, you would sort it first. There might be another, because of the list we've been given is not sorted, there's a certain type of search we would do. Alright? Yeah. A linear search. Alright? And what we're going to do is we're going to find the smallest item. So what you'd need to do, the best way for you to answer programming questions is to look at what you would physically do. Some of you are more visual learners, that's why I'm doing it this way. So what I would do, personally, is I would have a box here, and I would put the first item into it, alright, and I would call this lowest number. Does that make sense? This is before I've even thought about coding. So now, what have I got left over? 9, 3, 4, 2. So then what I would do is each time I would just iterate through this. So I'd go to number 9 and check if 5 is it lower? Is 9 lower than 5? So is 9 lower than, I'm just going to put L for lowest number. Is 9? Is 9 lower than 5? No. X. Iterate. Go to the next one. Is 3 lower than 5?
Yes.
So then what you do is 3 goes in there. Alright? So 3 is now the lowest number. Okay? Is 4 lower than 3? No. Is 2 lower than 3?
Yes.
So that value now becomes 2. Now, what sort of loop did I do to work that out? So half the battle here is not to be able to be a good coder, it's about thinking about decomposing the problem and looking what you would do. What would you do?
I would use a for loop.
You'd use a for loop. Would I do a for loop from here or from here? When I start my program, would I do a for loop from here or from here? Five or 9? You would start from 9. Why am I going to test it against myself? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by setting up my minimum number. So min, and I'm going to allocate it. There's my array, r underscore int. But what you would do is you would pick the position of the first item. That, I'm just going to put a comment here. Alright, you don't need to put that, but I'm just putting this here. Alright, would mean that 5 goes into min. I haven't lost anyone at that point, have I? Now all I do is I do a for loop that starts at number 9 and goes to 2. To do that, I say for x is, what number are we going to start at? Somebody said that? Was that you that said that? Yeah, what number was that? You said?
5. 9 is a 1.
If that is 0 in an array, what number is that?
1.
So I'm starting at 1, position 1. For I is 1, 2, you can either use len, you can either do len minus 1 or 4. So I'm going to write both ways next to each other so you can see it. So I could go x is 1 to 4, alright? Or I could do for x is 1 to len r int minus 1. Remember, if you are in pseudocode, you subtract 1. If you are in Python, you do not need to. It was the difference between exclusive. Alright? So, remember that pseudo is inclusive, whereas Python, I'm going to write the code out, Python is exclusive at the top. So if it went up to 5, it's actually only going up to 4 in Python. Okay? You'll see in a minute when I do my own. Alright? So, for x is 1 to 4, all I'm going to do now is if, and I'm going to say r underscore int square bracket x is less than min, then min is now allocated the value I'm currently on. For those of you that need to annotate, that value of x is what's going in here. So you're using x as a counter, as an index. So that is x, that is x, that is x, that is x. Does that make sense? So because the value of x changes each time we iterate, I'm going to say is if that item in that position of that array is less than the minimum value, then I'm going to replace it, the min, with the value I'm currently on. Then the value of x goes up next time. The value of x is 2. So in position 2, I've got 3. Is 3 less than min? If it is, then I replace it. I go to the next item, and so on. That is what's happening. Now I'm going to end that if. Alright. Going to end my for. There's one last mark that I need there. Let's have a look at our bullet points again. I had a subroutine called find minimum. Done that. Passed my parameter in. Done that. What have I not done? I've not returned a value. So all I do is go return min. And we're going to go end subroutine. Now, this is your opportunity to ask me this question or ask me anything about this so that I've recorded it. I will show you how to answer this question in Python as well, because you're going to write it in Python in your book next to this, so you'll give yourself space. Are there any questions on this? Yes?
What would you put in the for loop if you didn't know how many values were in the list?
This is what this bit's for here. If I don't know how big my list is, so for example it could have 2 million items in it, I would do the length of the list minus 1 in pseudo. In Python, you don't need to subtract 1 from it. You only do the minus 1 in pseudo. Yeah, so you use the len as a built-in function to find out how many items are in the list. Yes?
When you put a return min, it's not possible to put output.
No, because that's not what it asked you in the question. It said return it. When you return something, the value of that function, so this, by doing return, this now basically is turned it into a variable, which is the value you returned. Okay? Yes? It already is an array. It's assuming that as part of the question. You're not outputting anything. It only wants you to return the minimum value in this question.
Can you explain what the first line means?
This line,
Yeah.
you are defining your subroutine, yeah, with a name and passing the parameter in. So I'm saying I've got a subroutine called find minimum, as asked, but I'm passing this data in so that I can use it. Okay? I will show you it in Python in like a 2-part video now. Okay? So there'll be 2 videos to this, and now I'm going to show you the Python version.